Check 1, 2. Compound Nation, Monday night, another special event. We've been hitting you guys with special events like crazy all winter. This one's going to be really special. My friend Mary Childs is here. Mary, wave hi to everyone. I want everyone to know which one you are. Okay. It's that one, guys. All right. Mary is the author of the hottest book in finance right now this spring. It's called The Bond King. Hold that up one more time. How one man made a market, built an empire, and lost it all. And yo, none of that is an exaggeration. And I've written 3 books. Mary, that's all like, it was an empire. It was a big deal.
It was.
Still a big deal, just without him now.
Deal. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm so glad you agree with it.
We're so happy to have you. And we're gonna start, I think we're gonna start with Michael. We kind of figured out some sort of order that we want to ask questions, and a reminder for the chat. Guys, ask a smart question. We'll ask Mary. She knows like everything on this topic. So Duncan's going to be combing for questions, and we'll bring him in later to ask the best couple that come out. All right, Michael, go ahead.
Okay, so Mary, first of all, congratulations. Amazing book. Fun, informative, crazy stories, history. It has it all. So buy the book. Here's where I want to start. It's kind of wild to think that prior to like PIMCO and Bill Gross doing what they did, bond trading wasn't a thing. Like they actually kind of invented it. Back in the day, people bought bonds. They held them to maturity. They literally clipped coupons, and that was it. So why don't we start with like, why did bond trading even come to be?
Yeah, I love that. I think it is really wild. It's like bananas that this wasn't a thing prior to the 1970s, but you had this runaway inflation that really kind of created the right conditions for bonds to not make sense to be just sitting in vaults and like losing their value day by day, which I guess is kind of relevant now again. But basically, you know, when Bill started his job, he was clipping those coupons. He was literally sending those in for interest payments. And all of a sudden they were like, wait. Why don't we trade these amongst ourselves and see if we can do better than just holding them?
Nobody thought that there was alpha available in bonds until, was it PIMCO in those early days?
It was part of, it was a shell within Pac Mutual. But yeah, exactly, which doesn't make any sense. And it is kind of like hard to fathom. But it was also a hard sell at the time. People just didn't want to do it.
Well, there was like no liquidity either, right? They had no one to trade them with.
Exactly. If there's no market, there's no market. So
I think in New York, on Wall Street, it was bond sales. The issuer would say, we want to sell $100 million worth of whatever debenture, and here are the features. And then there would be a broker who would sell that. And the buyer had no expectation that there would be liquidity. They were just happy with okay, so actually bond trading originates on the West Coast, not on Wall Street.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's fascinating. Yeah. So he came to dominate that fairly quickly, or not necessarily? Yeah. What's the background on that?
I think that's right. I mean, there's this guy that I talked to who's one of his very close friends, Howard Rakoff. And I sort of parasocially call him Howie, even though the only person in the world who calls him Howie is Bill Gross. I'm like, hi, Howie. Like, it's not his name. But he was kind of an evangelist for bond trading. He got it kind of stuck at like a little bee in his bonnet and went around to all the different banks and insurance companies. And he was like, we got to trade these, you got. And everyone was like, who is this guy? Why is he yipping at me? But that was kind of, I mean, it was fun to kind of find. I really hadn't seen any coverage of this guy anywhere. And to find this, like, I don't know, patient zero of bond trading was so fun. But he went around and created almost single-handedly. You know, people credit Bill, but Bill will tell you, he was just there when the lights went on.
What year is this, roughly?
Oh, gosh. This is like 71, 2, 3.
So there were two tailwinds.
A long time ago.
There was two tailwinds. There was one, inflation eating away the coupon payment, so they had to like get into the newer coupon issued.
Exactly.
And also ERISA coming around.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
So every regulation since Adam is what I'm told it stands for. That's a joke from my.
It's a pension geek one. That's a good one.
Thank you. I was like waiting for the laughter. It's not there.
All right, I got it.
Thank you. But no, it basically opened the floodgates where it like formalized the mutual fund industry as we know it today. And everyone needed like a professional money manager to manage their money. And it just happened that PIMCO had just started this kind of trial portfolio when the lights went on. And they were like, okay, well, we have this like, 2 to 5 year, they had this little short track record, but it was enough to show people that they were for real and they could manage your money. And they were, they had this insurance company behind them. They had a really good position to pitch to people. And that's what really started the flood.
The other thing about that time was rates were obviously way higher. You
Way
know?
higher.
So I think a lot of people probably want to say, well, Bill Gross was great at bond trading and all, and he started it, but he got lucky because he had the tailwind of falling rates and starting. But I mean, reading your book, this guy was like a maniac in the best and worst way possible. So like you said that the question he would ask people was when he was interviewing them would be, do you want money, power, or fame? And he said, I wanted to be famous. So part of me thinks, like, let's say Gross started today in this rate world where treasuries are 2%.
Crypto.
He probably would have. Yeah, he probably would have done fine either way, right? Like he was going to be successful no matter what. Like the fact that he became famous as a bond fund manager is like crazier than the Kardashians becoming
you're
famous,
saying
right?
the bonds are just
Right?
incidental, given that was the fat pitch at the time?
I think he would have figured it out anyway, right?
I agree with that. I think that's right. I think the bonds were sort of the thing that he was good at and the place where he had an edge, but it is kind of the vehicle for the overall goal, which is fame. I think that's totally right, which is like kind of mind-blowing because we know him as this bond legend, and that's like the world that we keep him in.
Mary, what aspect of the fame did he seem to covet so much? Because it doesn't seem to have gone well ever since he attained it after the great financial crisis, which we'll get to. But what was it about fame, do you think, that he really made him really want it?
I mean, it's such an interesting question, and I feel like I could spend another 7 years thinking about it. I'm going to try not to.
We have 25 minutes.
All right, so he is, he's a psych major from college. Like he thinks about this stuff a lot. But I think what he told me was, it's like, oh, I have this need from not having gotten hugged as a child. Like it's my cold Canadian parents is why I need this. Why I have this hunger for fame. It's like a proxy for being loved, and like. We all know, including Bill Gross, that's not going to work, right? Like he knows rationally that, and he says this in the book, that it's not going to fill in that hole, right? Being famous, getting headlines is not going to make him feel loved. But I think that quick hit of like, I mean, we all love being retweeted. Like I feel like this is a very accessible and like resonant concept where like he wanted that adrenaline hit. He wanted that little feeling that like, they like me. They really like me. And that's obviously impossible to hold on to. And it's so addictive.
So everyone likes the feeling, but most people don't like specifically chase it and
engineer their lives around it.
Intuitively. Yeah.
So, Mary, I'm not finished with the book, so forgive me if you covered this.
Oh, no spoilers. Sorry.
But did you get into the relationship that he had with his parents? Like, was that was it his upbringing that like did it?
I mean, to some extent. I mean, isn't that true for all of us, right? But I do think, he cites like Mother Goose Shirley being kind of the nothing was ever good enough for her. And there's this like somewhat chilling scene that he wrote about in an investment outlook where he goes to the mausoleum where they rest and he's like, isn't that good enough? And you're like,
oh God, what? He holds up his Morningstar tear sheet?
Nah, it's the billions, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know.
Ben, why don't you ask about the golf thing?
Yes, so you had this great story about how his wife at their golf club got a hole-in-one,
Yes.
and it was well celebrated,
Yes.
and that was like his goal. He's like, I'm going to get a hole-in-one as well.
Yeah.
And he claims he hit a hole-in-one. No one was there to view it. Now, and he claims he did it, but he was so mad because no one saw it.
I once did 50 pull-ups, but nobody was watching.
This is like I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think he did it? Or do you think he would lie about that, would he not?
Oh my God, I actually hadn't really thought about that. Yeah.
I feel like he made it up. When I read that, I was like, he definitely made this up.
You know why that's such a stupid thing to lie about? Because it literally has nothing to do with skill. I've seen people play golf like in their first year of golfing hit a hole in one. It's like it's not even like,
Wait,
I won a triathlon and
Right.
nobody else remembers. Like there's no skill in hitting a hole in one.
72% sure he made it up.
And also, who cares?
Right.
He
cares.
cares. He cares a lot. But, the thing that I love about his investment outlooks is it's always his, like, worst stories. Like, I had a friend in college who would always just, like, corner you at a party and tell you everything embarrassing that ever happened to her. She's like, I'm kind of failing physics. Is that bad? And you're like, that's kind of bad. Yeah. Like, I don't know what to... But she, like, would tell you it and the way she told it, you're like, no, that's fine. That's great. And, like, it's kind of that public processing, which, like, obviously provided a ton of fodder for me as a journalist writing a book about this guy. But it's also, like... That makes me think that he didn't because he had so much to mine. And you see him still doing it, right? Like he's out there coming up with new stuff to just confess to you over and over, like more and more and more. So if he's not really.
It's a confessional though.
It's a confessional.
So one thing that the three of us have in common with Bill Gross, besides billions of dollars, is that all of us write, I think, like fairly personal accounts of being involved in the investment markets.
Yeah.
Maybe like me to the greatest extent, Michael somewhere in the middle, and then Ben is a little bit more like Midwestern modest.
on, Ben.
We don't get
Let's
a
go.
ton on his personal life and problems, but that's probably our spectrum. But I think what resonated, one of the things that probably helped Bill Gross become famous was like
Definitely.
Buffett, like Howard Marks.
Bogle.
He had a content strategy. This is so important. No, but he did though. Like
No, literally.
that
Yeah.
was how he got his name out. In addition, obviously, to good returns, he built a brand, and way before most people were thinking that way. Would you agree?
Completely. Absolutely agree. Yeah. I mean, I think like he would point to the Booker guy at Lou Rukeyser's Wall Street Week for like making him. And I think
Yeah.
that's like true. Like he was the Bond guy on that show at a time when people were like, wait, what? Like, what even are you talking about? And he was really young and he was like kind of irreverent, as we know. And I do think you're right. Like and people loved reading those investment outlooks. You know, they start with this like kooky story that's somehow embarrassing or like very, you know, you're just like, what did he just say? And then he pivots so hardcore to interest rates. But it, you know, there aren't that many people that just like do that in our world, or there weren't certainly. That it was just like a confessional. So he was extremely interesting and extremely early to like branding.
You were
So-
you were doing tons of you were doing tons of stories about this
Yes.
in real time.
Yes.
And I want to cut to like the post financial crisis. You come along as can I call you a cub reporter? Is that
You may,
insulting?
yes. No, I'm
no,
not
you were
insulting.
like
It's true.
a
It's
kid,
literally
but you
true.
were like super excited about covering
I was.
the Bond Kings, and they were the new stock picking stars.
Yeah.
Like probably from 2009 till 2016,
Yeah.
it was all about Gunlock, Gross,
was the
a few
golden
others.
age. Yeah.
Elarian. Okay, so what was it about this that made you say, I'm going to spend a few years and write a book on it?
Yeah, I definitely did think it was a few, not 7. So that's part one.
Yeah, you started this in like 2014. Is that what you said to
Yeah,
Meb?
yeah. Like when
Jeez.
he quit fired, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Well, I did this like big story, and once that story came out, I was kind of like, this is only 3,000 words, but I'm pretty sure I could write another 100. Yeah, I didn't realize it would take me this long, but I do. Yeah, I think like the times, like it seemed like there just wasn't this mainstream appreciation for bonds. And like, of course, I have a structural bias there where I think that stocks are dumb, as we've discussed. And
Yeah.
I think that more attention writ large should be paid to bonds, right? I think they're so much more interesting for my money's worth. It's like where rubber meets road for like corporations and governments and all these things. Like that's
I
where
agree,
the real
except for
things
the
happen.
returns.
Yeah, well, fair, yeah. As a journalist, it's certainly more interesting. But yeah, at the time, it was like this kind of heyday for them. I think you're right, and it created. I was like, where's the book on PIMCO? Like, why is there no? And there's like a there's another book about Bill Gross, but it's from before they were really what they are, and I just was kind of. And there's like, where's the BlackRock book? Like, I know that these things are impossible. I kind of know now why there wasn't a book about PIMCO. 'Cause no one else is as dumb as I am to just go ahead and write it. But I do think that was like, that was right. There was no like. It's just not broadly understood, and the kind of massive influence that they have is so disproportionate to that understanding and even awareness.
Hey Mary, I think like we forget it's been like, when did he go to Janus? I don't remember what year was that, but that was like
2014.
that was like the meme of maybe not even just the year, but like the years.
A
like
long time.
Anytime something happened, it was to Janus.
XX to Janice, yeah, completely.
For the people that are unaware of that story, give us like the synopsis of he has a falling out with Muhammad, and then what?
Well, so he has a falling out with Muhammad. Muhammad quits and leaves PIMCO in January 2014. And then there's this big story in the journal about how like it was a fractious divorce, turmoil at the top. And the kind of 1-2 punch of that, I think, really destabilized Bill. It was like much more emotional for him than I think, a lot of people would have experienced it, or I don't know, would have been optimal for sure. And so over the months, he starts kind of fixating on who leaked to the press and who was the mole. And he's just not showing up to work like as a professional that much. He's showing up as a person. And the other people who are managing PIMCO are like, this is not manageable. We can't do our jobs. And it starts getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually I say he gets quit fired because there was some confusion over, this became the subject of a lawsuit as to whether he quit or was fired. So yeah, he just ends up abruptly, no one outside really knew that this was happening. There was like this big journal article in February. There was this Morningstar conference where he seemed kind of like, everyone was like, what even is going on? Like,
I was at that, and I was there, and the crowd was like
Bananas.
stunned.
I think we
They were
have
all
an,
kinda like,
I think
"What
we have a
just
shot of. I
happened
think we have a
here?"
shot of that, John.
What
What
happened?
the fuck is this about
What is
now?
this?
It
Yeah.
was, and the crazy thing is your book starts out
What a
talking
picture.
about how good of a call he made before 2008,
Yeah.
and like, I mean, I'm just imagining he would have done this because of his personality, but if he walks off into the sunset, then he
Right.
is. I mean, his legendary status is like you can't
Forever.
touch that. He's on Mount Rushmore, and since then he's slowly like chipped away at that. And I think that Morningstar conference might have been one of the first things where everyone. I remember people in the crowd going like, "I'm getting on the phone right now, and we're selling our stake in that
Wow.
fund
Yeah.
right now."
Yeah.
This guy's nuts. We're selling. Hey, the subtext of that is important, though. Not the subtext, the context of that. So basically, he nails the great financial crisis. I mean, no offense if you're a bond manager, probably that's like a default, but okay, fine.
There
He
were some that
does.
did not, to be fair.
He does the thing. He does the thing. Let's give it up. And that's after years of good performance. It's not a fluke,
Right.
like Paulson or something. Like this
Right.
guy, they were calling him Secretariat, or he was, and he thought other people would follow. But anyway, he crushed. He had great returns, and then when it really mattered, he steered the PIMCO. What was PIMCO total return? He steered that fund, the largest bond fund in the world, I think, at that time, or he steered that thing through the storm, no question. But then, I think from 2011 on,
Exactly.
pretty much everything he said and did turned out to have been the wrong. Like I think he was like betting against Treasury bonds, and they whipped
Yes.
higher into the debt ceiling thing. Like I feel like there were a lot, and then maybe in his eyes, you could corroborate whether this is true. So not only now do you have a lot of dissatisfaction among investors in that fund for the first time ever, but then you've got this layer of young guns beneath him and Mohammed El-Arian who are like, why is this guy making $50 million a year? When are
George
we?
was like,
When are we ever going to get our
that?
shot?
Yeah.
Right? Is there any truth to that?
I think there is. I mean, it's also like that's one framing. There's also kind of a different angle to it where it's like within PIMCO, you have no credibility. I mean, this is true in finance all across the board, but it's very true at PIMCO. If you have bad performance, like why are you talking? Like who are you and why are you even here? So for that to be,
That's
you
a
know what I
great
mean?
culture.
Like,
That's a great culture. I like that.
like for that to be Bill Gross trying to like steer the ship and like make all these big pronouncements when he had to apologize for performance in 2011, like his armor was like, I mean, he was already wounded, right? And so I think you're right to say that that's kind of the moment where things started to fall apart for him. And like from there, yeah, there's just when you're talking with no credibility, especially when you're someone as like acerbic and cutting as Bill Gross seems to have been as a manager, you know, he's not going to tolerate. You know, he's just going to stay the same as he always was in investment committee, which is extremely harsh. And people were like, wait, why is this happening to me? What gives you the right, you know? And like he's
Yeah,
like
look at
yelling
your
at
numbers,
Iverson.
who are you?
Right, exactly. So
Okay.
I think there's just to some extent there's no coming back from that. Like you can come back from a bad journal article, you can just like keep going and everyone eventually forgets. But I think like once you like internally at PIMCO, he was pretty damaged by that point.
What about at Janus? Like, what was that reception like? Imagine being a Janus employee knowing that Bill Gross is coming to town.
Right. Right. No, I think some of them were stoked, right? I mean, the share price went up a lot. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, we're in the big time now."
And then he walks in here like, all right,
You just had the glasses ready.
here's how it's going to be. Secretariat is here.
And didn't he basically fund it all himself? Like the majority of the money that went in was his personal capital, right?
Yeah, $700 million of it was his personal capital, which like no one did the math at the time, I don't think, but like he was paying for the privilege of that job.
Wait, can we back up though
Yeah.
before even Janice? Does Mohammed El-Arian come out of this looking like the good guy the way that I think most of us look at him and we say, he's such a nice guy. How could he have had any real fault here? But we don't. Who knows, right?
But in the court of public
maybe you
opinion,
know.
Muhammad definitely got the
Oh,
benefit.
obviously,
of the doubt.
that's my point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe Mary knows something different than we all seem to think.
Yeah, I think Muhammad was pretty uncomfortable with the reporting of this book. I think for this reason, you know, he has a really good reputation externally, and internally it is a different story. You'll notice in the book he did not participate until the extremely last minute. He all of his comments are from a lawyer.
Your story about him and his daughter, like as a parent, crushed me. That one
I
was
know,
like,
right? Me too. I know. I found
geez.
that instructive. Yeah.
But the other thing about this that I'd read all these stories about Gross before, but you going into PIMCO and the culture there, that is stuff that I had never really read much before. And my first thought was, there's no way in hell my personality as a Midwestern, what'd you call me, Josh?
You seem way too
Midwestern.
nice.
I said you are modestly Midwestern
There you
or
go.
Midwesternly
But
modest. It
talking
was a
about how,
compliment,
like,
dude. It was a compliment.
No, that's what I'm saying. But my Midwestern roots would not have worked there because you're talking about people getting nasty emails and how political it was, and sleeping in your car so you could get up at 3 a.m. to work until 6 p.m. And basically, you made it sound like everyone there was miserable, and it
Well,
was
'cause they
an
couldn't
awful place
leave.
to work.
They can't.
Where were
like,
they
do
gonna
you
go?
Right.
And you're saying
Mary,
how
talk-
they're
Mary,
in
talk
this
about
great
that.
place, but it's just an awful place to work. Like how obviously they
Yeah.
got paid a lot, right? That's the
How many people?
silver
How many
lining.
people? How many people wanted to tell you those stories?
Oh,
and
all of them. It's so funny.
So you found ex or current PIMCO people?
I talked. Oh gosh, I talked to more than like 200, almost 250 people for this book. I don't know what proportion of those were like I was a consultant versus I worked at PIMCO. I haven't actually. I should crunch those numbers. But it is really funny to me in the aftermath. You know, I published this book. I've been working on it for way too long. Everyone was so nervous the entire time I was reporting it. I was getting all kinds of paranoid phone calls and whatever. And so it comes out, and everyone's like, I have heard that people at PIMCO were just squirreled up, like, you know, like reading their little copies in the corner, and like no one was doing any work. And I'm sure they were doing work. I'm so sorry. But like the feedback I've gotten, they're like, you nailed it. The assholery. Can I curse on this?
Yes.
They were
Cut
like,
her mic. That's it.
I'm so sorry, you guys.
We'll see you next book.
See you in 20 years. No, they were like, this is right. You nailed it. This is exactly how it is. And the assholery, the culture is exactly right. And I got one guy emailed me and he was like, I had my first nightmare since leaving PIMCO after reading your book.
Oh man.
He
What was
like,
the nightmare?
Yeah, Bill Gross was yelling at him on the trade floor. Was the night. And
They
I was
called
like,
the PIMCO in New York. They called PIMCO the beach.
Yeah.
So when they had bond orders from PIMCO, they said the beach wants
Exactly.
X 100 million in treasuries or whatever, right?
Exactly.
But did people back east understand what a pressure cooker it was in Newport? Because when you picture Newport Beach from Lower Manhattan, you just picture golf and the ocean and like a bunch of clowns who don't really work that hard. But that's
Right, but
not
then
what
you
this
visit.
was.
Then you visit,
Yeah.
and like Fashion Island, like no one's wearing a suit but these guys. Nobody looks miserable but these guys. Like
Yeah.
everybody else is in flip flops and t-shirts.
That place,
and, like,
that place is
living
the
their
best.
life.
That place
Yeah,
is the
it's
best.
Beautiful. I mean,
Hey
it's
Mary,
beautiful there.
did you speak to his neighbor?
I spoke to his neighbor's lawyer.
Okay. What a story that was. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think Bill's
Isn't that
pretty unhappy
it's
about it.
ongoing, right?
It's ongoing. Yeah, it's failing to end.
Explain to
I
people.
had to just stop the book.
Explain
yeah.
to people what's going on there. Not
So-
everybody is aware, but it's
Follows it
pretty
this
wild.
closely. That's so weird. So Bill Gross and his new wife Amy, they bought a house in Laguna. It's called Rockledge by the Sea. It's very beautiful, and they installed this $1 million Dale Chihuly sculpture, and it's like a bunch of blue glass tubes, you know. And okay, they love it. They're very happy. Amy's like obsessed with it. She's like praying to it. She loves it. Whatever. Love their art. That's great. But it somewhat obscures the view of their next door neighbor. And the neighbor's like, "Can you take that down?" And they're like, "No." And then they put a protective net. Oh, sorry, I'm getting the order on. They put a protective net over it because it got like damaged in some way. And the neighbor's like, "Okay, that's a soccer net, and it's like I can't. It's like very distracting. Do you mind?" And they're like, "We mind." So the neighbor complains.
When
to the
you
city.
live there on the ocean, like the view
This
is
is-
why
yeah.
you live there and why you paid that much money.
Right.
This is not a regular suburban dispute between neighbors.
And it's
These
weird
people
how-
have
yeah.
$100 million properties.
And their houses are like weirdly on top of each other. Like this is a luxurious home. These homes are gorgeous. They have space, but they're like weirdly kind of stacked. Like it's like a little bit of Manhattan living. But so they're like, they complain to the city. The city's like, "Oh, you need to get the proper permits." And then Bill Gross and Amy start playing loud music at all hours. And they start playing the Gilligan's Island theme song on repeat.
What was that about? What was that about?
Apparently it was filmed
Don't
near
worry
there.
about it. I'll tell you
Don't
later.
ask too many questions. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so and like Green Acres and a lot of 50 Cent, which I was happy for the
mean-
resurgence in I mean, I feel like there's been like
really
a lot
is
less
the king.
Curtis lately. Yeah.
He really is the king.
Right? Well, the thing is, he's playing it at the legally allowable
Yeah, of course he
sound
is.
limit. Of course he is. There's nothing
Sick.
illegal happening here.
All
Why
right, this
are
is
you
all
complaining?
alleged. This is all alleged. We don't
Right.
know any of this for 100% fact, right?
My other
we
favorite
do.
thing
The
that
court
you
ruled.
like, I've always thought
Oh,
this.
okay.
You talked about how like he would talk crap about stocks
Mm-hmm.
and like and he'd say like I'm selling out of my 401k, and you're like he didn't really mean it. And but that's just something bond fund managers have to do, right? They have to kind of talk down on the stock market because that makes bonds look better in comparison, right?
I mean, yeah, but I also think he had this kind of uncontrollable impulse to talk shit about stocks. Just like I don't know that it was so conscious sometimes. Like in the same way that like maybe he didn't mean to antagonize his neighbor to the degree that he did. Like maybe he like it's an impulse control question also, where you're on TV and you just keep talking. I don't know. I do think that there's like there's a difference between like intentional. I don't know. It's a good question.
Do you think he could raise money today if he was like, I'm coming out of retirement?
Ooh, you think so? I mean,
Today?
people are
raise
still
money
obsessed
today?
with him, so he could raise something. I don't know
Who
about
would-
institutional
who
capital.
Would, who would allocate to him? He could do like a meme raise in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Should he do an NFT?
Wait, what do you mean? What's a meme raise? What do you mean?
He could like literally put clips
Oh,
of
he
him
should
at
do
the
a
Morningstar
SPAC.
conference in
should do a
sunglasses,
SPAC.
And
and he would
yeah.
instantly be the hottest thing on Reddit
That's a
for
really
like
good
3
idea.
days.
The problem
could
is
do a
just that
meme
he
raise.
hasn't pivoted. You're right.
The problem is it would be bonds, and people would be like, "Okay, where's the rocket? When does the rocket? When
Right.
does the
Like when
rocket
are we
show
taking
up?"
off? Yeah. That is.
Yeah.
the
Hey,
problem.
Mary, what do you say to people who say that he had the wind at his back? Because my answer is like, well, there was like hundreds of thousands of other
Exactly.
PMs that didn't become Bill
Thank
Gross.
you. Right. That's the
Okay.
first. Yes, that's the first part of the answer. And the second part, because this is the number one question that I get, is everyone's always like, "Oh, he was just lucky," and it's just
Right.
there were a lot of other lucky. That doesn't mathematically make any sense. But I think like, there are a couple papers.
Wait,
that look-
wait. So hold on. In the late '70s, early '80s, 10-year Treasury is yielding what? 25%?
Yeah,
No,
15
huh?
probably.
15? I mean, the mortgage rates are.
I think it got up to
20%,
18.
right?
Yeah, it
But
did.
anyway, everyone else had the wind at their back too. He wasn't the
Hold
only
on.
one.
So for the next 40 years,
Yeah.
bonds go up, yields go down, basically almost in a straight line with a few years of exception.
Yep.
And he actually questioned himself in one of his last memos, to like, have I
April
just been lucky
2013.
all this time? But what sets him apart, to Michael's point, what sets him apart from 1,000 other bond managers over that? Is it longevity? Is it the fact that he was writing and communicating? Like
Yes,
what
it's
really
all
sets him
these.
apart?
Completely
It's
all of these.
all of that
so
stuff.
He had some real insights that actually were different that I think other people either didn't see as clearly or didn't structure their trades as well around. So I think one of those was like the investing in mortgages. Like I just think they were earlier and better. And then, I think he took more credit risk. He had a better kind of duration sense and selling volatility. Like these are real things that he did. And there's like, there are like kind of nuances within that. There are kind of sub strategies. Like my personal favorite is the kind of cash and cash equivalent arbitrage, where like if Michael is holding his, derivative position cash in cash, and I'm just like, hold on 1 second, I'm going to just invest that in like short dated corporates. I'm just going to make a little bit more than Michael every day, and that over 40 years is always going to help. Like it's very rare that that's going to blow up on me. Now, where that line is of what I'm investing in, like there's apparently a robust debate as to whether or not Russian floaters should count in the cash equivalent bucket, which like today we would say no. But there's absolutely, 9 times out of 10, that's going to work. So over those time periods, yes, I think he did have those real insights. And there was a paper a couple years ago by Richard Dewey and Aaron Brown that kind of looked into this and stripped out those 3 factors and did find that, yes, that's actually a large kind of reason for his performance.
But I think to your point of him being good, I read that about the leverage. He was the first one to do it, basically. So
Exactly.
Because he was the one who thought about it, like, hey, wait a minute, we can get free returns here because we're earning
Right.
higher returns on this cash.
Right. And the whole time, and just sticking to that.
And he
was the
invented
thing.
total return. That was like he
Yep.
did all this.
He did that.
So that's a good segue to the next thing I wanted to ask you, which is that just as he's imploding, there's another superstar bond manager on the rise.
Who could it be?
Literally works maybe 2 hours by car away from him, stealing his thunder, generating amazing returns. Jeff Gunlock launches Double Line, comes out of what was that firm called before? TCW, comes out, brings his team with him, knocking the cover off the ball. I think he was involved in like non-agency MBS, and he had like this very specific niche that worked really well during the crisis. And he essentially steals PIMCO's thunder for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be a contributing factor to Bill Gross going slowly crazy, or maybe not that slowly, because it's hard to see the new
Yeah.
kid in town
Yeah.
all of a sudden be anointed the new Bond King. And he's probably sitting there like, all right, I'll shave my mustache, but I'm still here, guys. Right? Like, so
I
what?
think that's right.
What element
Yeah.
did that play? What role did that play in your narrative as you got later into his career?
I think that's really incisive. I think that's right. I do think
I'm
that
very
like,
good at this.
You're very good at this. I think that he absolutely one of his defining traits is what I would call paranoia, right? It's this clinical insecurity and like beyond the point of rationality, watching your competitors and making sure that you're beating them. And when it's someone like Jeffrey Gunlock coming up, like you feel that. I do think that he was watching him very closely and
Well,
absolutely
he probably took money. There's
Yeah,
probably
absolutely.
there's probably 30, 40 billion AUM ultimately that went from one house to the other.
Literally.
Did they ever
And you could
have
see
a
it.
relationship at all? Did they ever talk?
did.
They did. They had this like summit, this big meeting of the. Well, it's in the no spoilers. It's in the book, but but it's
He
like
wanted
when-
Double Line to hire him, though.
Yeah, they were about to hire him. They drafted a press release. They were ready to do it. Which can you imagine? Like
The
first of all-
content would have been
That would
been amazing.
Yeah, that would have gone well. That would have lasted for like 3 weeks.
Oh,
No, but
this book
from a
would've,
content standpoint, that should have happened.
Right. We would have all reaped the benefit from that, a lot of yield. But I do think that would have been a disaster. But I mean, speaking of branding, Jeffrey Gundlach is like kind of, the Bond king of content for sure now. And you see Bill in his own personal memoir that he released a couple weeks ago, he kind of took a shot at Jeffrey and was like, his return certainly would not justify the title. So
How come Bill? How
I
come
love
Bill
that
Gross?
I love that he's still petty.
still at it. Can't
How
let
is
go.
Bill Gross not? How is he not tweeting? I feel like he would love to
He
tweet.
is tweeting.
He is? Bill Gross?
Oh my God, I'll send it to you. It's real_Bill_Gross.
I didn't realize that either. I did not
Oh my
know.
God,
Is he verified?
I don't know.
He
if he's
he must not be
verified.
good at it.
Decline to comment.
He should tweet as his cat.
Oh yeah, Bob. Rest in peace.
Bill?
Bob.
Bob.
Yeah.
Right.
Wait, this is really him? His bio is Bill Gross is a renowned expert in the bond market and is at the forefront of thought leadership on the subject of
Leading
fixed
in thought
income investing.
leadership.
This
Yeah.
is really
You
him?
need to do
That's
that.
really him. Yeah.
He's a big third person guy. I've
Wait,
heard
he,
that.
he tweeted his book 2 hours ago. He's trying to one-up you, Mary.
I do think he's trying to one-up me. Yes. Yes.
Can you? What was the process like trying to get him to talk to you?
Oh, he was actually not. He was super open for many years. I think what happened was like, so in the aftermath, I heard that he pitched Michael Lewis to do this book, basically, and bless his heart.
While
Michael
you were
Lewis-
writing it already?
before I really started digging it. Yeah, thank you. Michael Lewis would never, but no, Michael Lewis also didn't. And I think so over the couple years, I think he was a little bit more optimistic about the book and like what I would write. A lot of people thought I was like a Bill person and like would only write from Bill's perspective. And Bill's he's not like dumb. He doesn't think that. He understands how journalists work just to a very large extent. But like, we had great conversations. I sat down with him for hours, for days in 2017, talking about his childhood, his cold Canadian parents, the things that motivated him. And it was like super interesting and wonderful. And
We should say this. We haven't been. Maybe we haven't been before you finish.
Yeah.
We might not have been reverent enough. He is a genius, and he was like beating Vegas at
Counting
cards
cards.
before he
Oh,
ever
that
touched
story.
the bond fund.
Yeah, the Ed Thorpe.
About,
He is a brilliant man, and he's interesting. He like does
So
martial
interesting.
arts, and like he's a very interesting and brilliant person, and we should say that.
Your
Okay.
first interaction with him, where he kind of Jedi mind tricked you because
Yeah.
he said you had
Blew
your
my
numbers
mind.
wrong. That was
Yeah.
great. Like he was playing a game with you there.
literally with everyone. And that's
Yeah.
so the story, just in brief, was that I had a mistake in a story about PIMCO, and I'd never met Bill. And he goes on Tom Keene's show, and he's like, Mary Childs needs to get her facts straight. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like 25. I don't know. And so I'm like literally vomiting at my desk. And so he calls me after, and I'm like, he said on air, we're like 70 bips or something over the benchmark. And I'm like, okay, I can replicate, like I can find this. I know how to use the terminal. I worked at Bloomberg. He calls me. He's like, you got your numbers wrong. I'm like, no, I'm so sorry. I know that I did. I got to fix them. But like, I can't replicate the numbers that you said. I've been trying different share classes. I've been trying different time horizons. Like, what am I doing wrong? And he's like, you got to say your numbers. I got to say mine. And I'm like,
He's a
what?
badass.
What?
All right. Before we get to the questions from the stream, who is playing him when HBO adapts your movie into a limited series?
I love
Who
it.
is the Bond King on prestige
I
television?
told you this. Robert Pattinson.
Terrible take.
Shut
Go ahead,
up.
Mary.
I love that. Oh my God, for young Bill, I love that. Okay.
Thank
so-
you. Mary, I've
barely
been
speaks.
saying that Pattinson
That's
looks
so
like a young
good.
Bill Gross.
I see it. I fully see it. So, okay. What about Steve Buscemi?
Oh, that's perfect.
I don't hate it.
What
That's pretty
about
good.
Say
Willem
more.
Dafoe?
That's good. That's good. That's good.
Willem Dafoe is
Dafoe,
my.
yes.
That's the most obvious.
Okay, okay. Michael
But he's
Shannon?
old. But he's old though. We need a young.
I know it's a little, yeah. And William
We
H.
don't want that
Macy
Irishman
also.
CGI shit. Like we need a young Bill,
no.
and we need a narrator Bill who's now
Yeah.
current Bill.
For some-
playing
yeah,
Gilligan's Island.
I think. I'm thinking you're right. We need like a young, like we will take Robert.
We need
Pattinson.
an
I think
unknown
that's
for
great.
Bill, so it doesn't distract.
You think?
Right? Yeah, I
I
feel
think
like
to
that
sell
always
it, you
got to
get that prestige
I
name.
feel like
you need a big name, like
if
a Bryan
Dun- what ab-
Cranston.
Right. Okay.
I know
What
he
if,
doesn't
like,
look like him. Sorry.
What if Duncan Hill shaved his beard?
Tony Shalhoub is Muhammad Al-Arian.
Literally. Have you been reading my literally?
No,
That's my
but
top
you and I
pick.
are
Yeah.
we're on the same wavelength.
Oscar Isaac is Muhammad.
Oh, okay. I
Ooh,
accept.
I don't hate that.
I don't hate
Bradley
that at
Cooper is
all.
Jeff Gunlock,
Okay.
the Pretender.
Okay.
Oh, this is going to be a huge
This is
movie.
going to be good. Who's Wendy
Show?
Cups?
Whatever. What are
Charlize
we
Theron?
making? It's called. The show is called Bips.
Who's Greenspan? Who's Greenspan?
I'm so happy right now. This is like my dream.
We just sold it for you.
That's great. All right, Duncan. Did anybody say anything or ask anything insightful before we let Mary go?
Hi, young Bill Gross in the show.
She's a young mom and has other things to do. So do we have anything good?
Very young, extremely young. Teen
Yeah.
mom.
We know this. We
Yeah,
know
so
this.
I mean, we have one that's like a softball question, but I think a good one from Dave, which is, what's
Dave.
your favorite Bill Gross story that didn't make it into your book?
Ooh, good question.
Oh, man. There's
What'd you
so
save for the
many.
sequel?
What did I save?
Also, can the compound produce this series? I feel like we should do
We
that.
have no money.
Call my agent. My favorite Bill Gross story that didn't make it into the book. I mean, his book actually covered a lot of these. There's one where he shot Lou Rukeyser with a rubber band on Wall Street, like on television. Speaking of impulse control,
as a gag?
yeah,
Or-
it like related to his investment thesis. You know, it was indicative. It was like the inelasticity of
he had a
consumer
prop?
demand or something. Yeah, he had a
He had a
prop.
prop.
Pew! And he like didn't really think that through, and then he didn't get invited back on or something. So that was a fun one. But
That's actually pretty good.
there were a lot from like the 70s and 80s where like I talked to so many guys from the 70s and 80s, and they were like, oh, that guy used to, he had a license plate that said Bonds, and it like pissed everybody off in Pac Mutual, and they were like, who's this guy? And he like pulls up and parks in the spot that isn't his next to the CEO, and just, he was always he had that swagger long before it was.
I kind of
evident
love
that it
him
was
more
earned.
when I hear these stories. It's kind of
know.
like endearing.
I know it's
It's-
really endearing.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
Anyone else ask anything good or?
So just for the sake of time, we'll just do one quick one from Blair, which is a pretty funny one.
Okay.
She just says, remember the monthly letter where he riffed on automatic toilets and how they don't recognize him?
Yeah.
Apparently that's a real thing.
He
What-
thought he
what
called
is
them
that about?
cameras. He said that there were cameras in automatic toilets, like automatic flushing toilets. And you're like, I guess.
As soon as I read that one, I sent them $7 million.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Take my money, man, please. This is
Yeah.
genius. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally got it. All right, Mary, listen to me. The book is a smash hit already. But
Thank you.
But we want everybody who's watching this. We want everybody who's watching this to buy a copy. And what I promised them is that I'm gonna put your address out, and you will sign most limited time though.
Yeah.
It has to be within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
But all right, listen. Everybody wants this book to be a success because we want you to do the double line story in a few years. No, we want you to. We'll
Death
get
first.
Fleckenstein, and we'll do it.
you
We'll do
know-
it right.
I have a saying now: never the living. I'm never
Yeah, okay.
writing about living people again. No.
Smart.
Thank you.
Anyway, we're rooting for you. Everyone who's read the book, Ben included, has had nothing but great things to say.
Thank
so congratulations on your first, maybe last book. And everybody can click on the link below. Follow Mary on Twitter and all of the places, and make sure you buy a copy of the book. If you don't want to read it, buy it for the investor in your life who may want to. There's a lot of great stuff in there. I hope they do the TV show. And if they do, Michael wants an executive producer credit. Can we do that?
I'll work on it. Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Let's
You're the
work on
best.
it.
Thanks for doing this with us.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations
So
again.
fun.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.